Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mass Retirees Weekly Update. Today's Friday, October 27th. I'm Sean Duhamel. Thank you so much for joining with us and tuning in again this week. I've got a couple of big updates on legislative activity, both in Washington, D.C., as well as here in Massachusetts. But before I do that, I want to thank everyone who took the time last week to turn out for our meeting in Pittsfield as well as our meeting in West Springfield. Attendance at both meetings exceeded our expectations. This was our first time back in the Berkshires since the beginning of COVID-19, so it had been 4 years. We had a great turnout in downtown Pittsfield last week. I'm sorry for those of you who attended, though, in terms of the parking situation. Unbeknownst to us, the parking garage at the hotel, which was formerly the Crown Plaza, now a Holiday Inn. Long story short, it was under construction. We did not know that until we arrived, and you can only imagine my surprise and Frank Valeri's surprise once we realized that we were going to have dozens of retirees showing up with no place to park that was convenient. But everyone made the best of a difficult situation. We had a great meeting. The following day on Friday, we were in West Springfield for the second time in 2 years. We were on the grounds of the Big E at the Starrowtown Tavern. We had a fantastic crowd in West Springfield, including members of the local legislative delegation who turned out. We've gotten some great feedback from Senator Vilas and Representative Finn and Representative Carey and Representative Blaze, just in terms of how impressed they were with the size of the crowd. And I got to tell you, when legislators or other officials come to our meetings and they see a vibrant, engaged group, that really means a lot. And word spreads around Beacon Hill, and it really assists us in terms of our advocacy work on your behalf. So thank you for coming out. The updated list of upcoming meetings is contained in the November Voice, which all of you should have either received by now or you will receive over the next couple of days. I know we've been hearing from members who did receive their copy. Page 3 of the newsletter is always our list of upcoming events. We have 2 more meetings in Massachusetts throughout the end of the year, both in terms of down on the South Coast in Westport, Mass., as well as in Auburn, Mass. in December. So the details of those meetings are on page 3 of the newsletter. But let me jump into the news of the week. So we got word earlier this week that there is a movement underway to bring or create a public hearing surrounding the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Of course, both of these laws relate to Social Security. The call for a public hearing is being driven by the main sponsors of H.R. 82, which of course is the federal legislation that would fully repeal both WEP and GPO. The bill is co-sponsored by Louisiana Congressman Garrett Graves, who is a Republican, as well as Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who is a Democrat. So this is a bipartisan bill. We have always viewed WEP and GPO as a bipartisan issue. This legislation at this time has 298 co-sponsors, including the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, also from Louisiana. The way this typically works in terms of which members of Congress typically sign on to bills like this really comes down to what state they happen to represent. And very similar to the situation that we face here in Massachusetts, the majority of public employees in the state of Louisiana are outside of Social Security as well. So if you are a congressman or the U.S. senators from Louisiana, they have a very similar interest in these issues as does the legislative delegation from here in Massachusetts. And that's why when you look at states like Texas, for instance, we get a lot of support across the board in Texas for the exact same reason. The majority of public employees and then retirees from states like Texas and California, Louisiana, Colorado, Illinois are in the same boat as Massachusetts by and large. The difference, though, in terms of Massachusetts is that our entire public workforce is outside of Social Security. We have never been part of the Social Security system, going all the way back to 1935 when the program was created. And that's why WEP and GPO apply to us. And I think all of you know the details by now of how this works. It has been about 7 or 8 years since Congress last had a hearing on the issues of WEP and GPO. The last hearing, I believe, took place back in 2016. Frank and I both attended that hearing. Our colleague from Texas, Tim Lee, was invited to testify before Congress in terms of these issues, and we were there to support him. The way that public hearings, however, work before Congress as opposed to here in Massachusetts is that not every bill that's filed receives a public hearing at the federal level. It has to be approved and scheduled by Congress itself, and it's a major undertaking. Once the hearing is scheduled, the only way you are allowed to testify in person is by invitation. So senior members of, in this case, the House Ways and Means Committee or the Subcommittee on Social Security, which is under Ways and Means, would issue invitations to a handful of individuals, as well as government officials. If the hearing takes place, I would imagine that officials from the Social Security Administration will be present and testify in terms of the fiscal impact of the various bills that are pending. Now, the call by Representative Spanberger and Representative Graves is for H.R. 82 to have a public hearing. We would anticipate, however, if a public hearing is going to be held, it will likely be on the overall issue of WEP and GPO, and that would include some of the other bills that are also pending, whether it's full repeal legislation or the other bills that we list in this month's newsletter that focus specifically on reform of the windfall elimination provision. So we're going to closely monitor this situation. Our association, as I said, joined the chorus this week, if you will, in calling for a public hearing. You know, in a perfect world, we would love to see Congress take action finally. This is well overdue, of course. Take action to actually pass one of these bills into law to provide immediate relief for retirees and fix this for future retirees. Absent Congress taking immediate action, however, we fully support a public hearing. The more attention we can bring to these issues, the better. It continues to put pressure on Congress to do something about this and to finally provide relief for retirees. The other key aspect of this is a public hearing will help to inform and educate the general public. You know, you've heard me say before, and you've read in our newsletter, one of the major hurdles that continues to be in front of us when it comes to WEP and GPO is the lack of public support. Up until now, we truthfully have not had high enough public support across the country to really make a difference. If anything, we actually have some opposition out there, and we've reported on that recently in the newsletter, from organizations who believe, particularly with full repeal, that it's not warranted, that it's a bad idea, and they're opposing H.R. 82 for those reasons. So a public hearing would help to put a spotlight on this issue, dispel some of the misinformation that quite honestly is out there on this, and help us to continue to advocate for Congress to take action. So we will have information, I hope, over the next week in terms of what the plans may or may not be in terms of holding a public hearing. Now, next week, Nancy McGovern and I will be in Washington for the annual conference of the Public Sector Healthcare Roundtable. The Roundtable is an educational resource and a think tank that focuses on the public sector healthcare plans across the country. So basically the GIC type plans that exist in all of the other states. So I believe that 40 or so states are anticipating or are thought to be participating in this. I've attended the conference in the past. It was very informative. I got a lot out of it. So Nancy and I are looking forward to being amongst our colleagues next week and interacting with officials from around the country, and hopefully we'll be better informed along with our GIC colleagues here in Massachusetts, who I believe are also attending, to be able to do a better job on your behalf going forward. You know, working in a collaborative fashion with our colleagues, whether it's on the retiree side of things or on the policy side of things from around the country, to allow us to be able to learn from one another, know what's happening out there, who's coming up with some innovative ideas to help get costs under control without degrading the quality of the benefits that you have. All of these things are important. While we're in Washington, we are also have scheduled meetings on Capitol Hill with both Republican and Democratic policymakers who are focused on Social Security policy. So Nancy and I should learn more next week. We'll be joined by Tim Lee and the folks from the Texas Retirees Association with these congressional visits. So hopefully we'll be able to come back with some inside information that we can share with everybody of what the best course of action going forward. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, I alluded to this earlier. One of the current co-sponsors of H.R. 82 is the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson from Louisiana. Now, it remains to be seen what Speaker Johnson's point of view and position is going to be on WEP and GPO going forward. Again, he has been a co-sponsor of full repeal now for the past few years. However, now that he is in the Speaker's position, it remains to be seen what his position is going to be going forward. Now, while it is wonderful to have the leader of the House of Representatives coming from a state that is a non-Social Security state and that he has some history with this issue in the past. However, we're going to be cautiously optimistic because that doesn't necessarily mean that this legislation will pass anytime soon. In recent history, we've had both Nancy Pelosi as well as Kevin McCarthy representing the state of California, and even though both of them had been supportive of changing or repealing or reforming WEP and GPO in the past, once they became Speaker, it did not take a front burner priority in terms of moving this forward. So we just don't know at this point. So I just wanted to fully let everyone know these are the moving parts to all of this. This is what we're focused on. And as I said a moment ago, hopefully we'll be able to come back from the trip to DC next week with a little bit more information. At the same time, we have a public hearing taking place here in Massachusetts on Tuesday. We have 3 legislative proposals that Mass Retirees has filed for the current session that remain to have a public hearing. 2 of those bills are before the Joint Committee on Public Service. They will be heard at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Our association president, Frank Valeri, and our legislative chairman, Tom Bonarigo, will be at the hearing. They'll be testifying. Nancy and I will be heading out to Washington about midday on Tuesday. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to be at the hearing, but we're in great hands with Frank and Tommy. The 2 bills, one of them is a veterans legislation that would change the definition of veteran. It would modernize the definition of veteran. That definition was changed back in 2004, but only prospectively for active employees. This legislation would retroactively apply that legislation to anyone who had retired prior to 2004. And this would specifically impact the veterans bonus and who qualifies for the bonus. The lead sponsor is Senator John Velas from Westfield, who is an active member of the Army Reserve. He's a major in the Army Reserve. He's also the chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee. So this is something that is certainly in his wheelhouse and that we're working very closely with him, as well as the House Chair of Veterans, Jerry Cassidy from Brockton, with the hope of moving this legislation forward over the coming months and finally passing something into law, both in terms of updating the definition of veteran as well as updating the actual veterans bonus, which has remained the same since 1957. It's never been changed since that time. So it's well overdue. In addition to the veterans legislation, we have a second bill that is sponsored by State Senator Paul Feeney from Mansfield. This legislation would prohibit the insurance contribution split that a retiree is paying at the time they retire. So let's say you're at 80-20 or 75-25 or 70-30, whatever that split might be in your local community. The way it stands right now is that the local community legally can change the percentage. They can make you pay more than you're already paying in terms of the percentage. This legislation would prohibit that. State policy for state retirees has been that the contribution split that's in effect at the time you retire remains in effect for your entire retirement. It can be increased for future retirees, but not for existing retirees. We believe this is fair. When you're living on a fixed income, like most of you are, it is very unfair to suddenly change the rules of the game midstream and force you to pay a higher percentage of your insurance premium. So this would apply that same state standard to the local level as well. Now we have one final bill that is before the Joint Committee on Financial Services, which hears a lot of insurance legislation. This particular bill changes the deadline for those communities that are participating in the state GIC. There is an annual deadline of when they need to notify the GIC if they're choosing to withdraw from the state plan. That deadline right now is December 1st. However, it doesn't provide ample time, we believe, for local retirees and employees and local officials to fully know what the GIC benefits will look like for the coming fiscal year. Because the GIC does not set plan design and establish the rates until February and March. So our legislation pushes back that notification deadline to after the GIC has reached a decision in terms of plan design and costs for the coming fiscal year. That way it supports full transparency while still providing ample time for these types of changes to be made. All of the details of the bills I'm talking about are contained within today's email message to all of you, which of course goes out to all Mass Retirees members at 6 a.m. Friday morning. So if you're watching this video, you want to learn more information, look to today's email. We'll have some links on there where you can either testify before public service next week, or if you would like to, you can watch the hearing online virtually. With that, I'm going to sign off for today. Thank you so much for being a member and for watching our weekly updates, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.